Your life feels heavy not because it is hard, but because your mind is uncontrolled. You think you make choices, but most of the time you are being dragged by impulses you never questioned. Craving decides your actions. Aversion decides your moods. Fear decides your limits. This is not freedom. This is quiet captivity. The Buddha was direct about this. A person who cannot govern their own mind owns nothing, no matter how much they possess. Wealth, relationships, status, even spiritual practices become decorations on a life that is internally chaotic. Until the mind is mastered, everything else is borrowed and unstable. If your mind runs you, it will cost you peace, clarity, discipline, and direction. Here are 7 lessons the Buddha taught to end that loss. 1. You are not your thoughts. Most suffering begins with a mistake so subtle that almost no one questions it. You assume that whatever appears in your mind is you. When anger arises, you don't say anger is present. You say, I am angry. When fear appears, you don't say fear has arisen. You say, I am afraid. When desire pulls, you don't say desire is happening. You say, I want. That single shift in language reveals the problem. The moment you say I am, you merge your identity with a temporary mental event. Authority is handed over instantly. From that point on, the thought does not need to prove itself. It feels personal. It feels urgent. It feels true. The Buddha identified this as ignorance, not because people are unintelligent, but because they have never been trained to look closely. Thoughts arise so quickly and so constantly that the mind mistakes motion for identity. But Buddhism is very clear. Thoughts are conditioned phenomena. They arise due to causes. They fade due to causes. They do not appear because you decided to think them, and they do not disappear because you command them to leave. Watch your mind carefully, and you will see this for yourself. A memory appears without permission. An image flashes uninvited. A judgment forms before you can stop it. If thoughts were truly you, you would control their arrival and departure, but you don't. They come and go on their own timetable. This is not philosophy. This is observation. The Buddha compared thoughts to clouds moving through the sky. The sky does not chase the cloud, argue with it, or become damaged by it. The cloud appears, changes shape, and dissolves. The sky remains untouched. Your awareness is the sky. Thoughts are weather. The suffering begins when you forget this distinction. When you identify with a thought, you start obeying it. Anger demands action. Fear demands avoidance. Desire demands gratification. Once obedience begins, consequences follow. Harsh words are spoken. Impulsive decisions are made. Regret accumulates. Then a new thought appears. Guilt. And that guilt is also believed. This is how one unexamined thought multiplies into an entire chain of suffering. Buddhism does not ask you to stop thinking. That would be unrealistic and unnecessary. The training is to see thinking clearly without being possessed by it. This is where mindfulness begins. Not as relaxation, not as escape, but as precise awareness. When a thought arises, you notice it as an event, not an identity. You recognize its tone, its urgency, its emotional charge. You do not argue with it. You do not suppress it. You do not follow it. You let it be known, and then you let it pass. At first, this feels unnatural. The mind has spent years believing it must react. When you stop reacting, discomfort arises, restlessness appears. The mind tries harder to regain control. This is normal. It is not failure. It is exposure. What is being exposed is the habit of identification. The Buddha taught that this habit is reinforced every time we say this is me or this is mine. My anger, my fear, my opinion, my story. Each claim tightens the grip. Each claim strengthens the illusion of a solid self behind the thought. But when you stop claiming, something changes. You begin to experience a gap between awareness and thought. At first it is brief, a fraction of a second where the thought is seen but not believed. In that fraction of a second, there is no suffering, there is clarity, there is space. That space is not emptiness in the negative sense. It is freedom from compulsion. Within that gap, you regain choice. Anger can arise, but you do not have to speak from it. Fear can appear, but you do not have to retreat. Desire can pull, but you do not have to obey. The mind still functions, but it no longer rules. This is what the Buddha meant by non-identification. Not detachment from life, but detachment from confusion. Over time, as this practice deepens, the mind becomes less convincing. Thoughts still appear, but they lose their authority. You begin to recognize familiar patterns, the same fears, the same narratives, the same doubts repeating themselves in different disguises, and you see something unsettling but liberating. Most of your thoughts are recycled. They are not insights. They are habits. Once this is seen clearly, trust in thought weakens. Wisdom strengthens. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You learn to distinguish between thoughts that are skillful and thoughts that are rooted in craving, aversion, or ignorance. You stop treating every mental event as a command. This is the first reclaiming of power. A person who cannot separate awareness from thought is owned by their mind. Every mood dictates behavior. Every impulse becomes a direction. Such a person may appear functional, but internally they are unstable. A person who sees thoughts clearly owns their inner life. They are not free from difficulty, but they are free from confusion. They experience pain without adding suffering. They act with intention instead of compulsion. The Buddha did not promise happiness through positive thinking. He offered freedom through clear seeing. When you truly understand that you are not your thoughts, something irreversible happens. You stop being dragged by the mind. You start using it as a tool, and for the first time, your inner world becomes a place of refuge rather than conflict. This is where the path begins. Craving is the real master. Most people believe they are free because no one is physically controlling them. They can move where they want, say what they want, buy what they want. But Buddhism makes a much sharper distinction. Freedom is not about external movement. Freedom is about internal command. And by that standard, most minds are not free at all. The Buddha identified craving as the hidden ruler of human behavior, not desire in a neutral sense, but craving as compulsive wanting. The constant urge for pleasure, comfort, validation, certainty, stimulation, and relief. This craving does not ask politely. It pressures. It whispers urgency. It convinces the mind that satisfaction is just one more action away. Craving says, just check one more time. Just say it. Just eat it. Just escape this feeling. And the moment you obey, it tightens its grip. The illusion is that craving promises relief. In reality, it only promises repetition. You may feel a brief release when you satisfy it, but what follows is not peace. What follows is the strengthening of the habit. The mind learns a dangerous lesson. Discomfort must be eliminated immediately. This is how the mind becomes weak. The Buddha taught that craving is the engine of suffering because it makes the mind dependent on conditions it cannot control. You crave pleasure, but pleasure fades. You crave approval, but approval fluctuates. You crave certainty, but life is unstable. Every craving attaches your well-being to something temporary. When that thing changes, anxiety appears. This is not accidental. This is mechanical. Watch craving closely, and you will see how it operates. It arises as a feeling of lack. Something feels missing, uncomfortable, incomplete. The mind labels this sensation as a problem that must be solved. Then it presents a solution based on past conditioning: food, distraction, praise, control, escape. Craving is persuasive because it uses urgency as a weapon. It does not say, "Consider this." It says now that urgency bypasses wisdom. It short-circuits reflection. The mind reacts before it understands. This is why craving feels like ownership. When craving is active, you are no longer choosing, you are complying. The Buddha did not teach that craving is evil. He taught that it is blind. It does not care about long-term consequences. It does not care about clarity. It only cares about continuation. Its only goal is to be fed. Every time you feed it, it grows stronger. Every time you resist it with awareness, it weakens. This is where many people misunderstand Buddhism. They think freedom comes from eliminating desire altogether. That is not the teaching. The teaching is to see craving clearly without obeying it, to experience the pull without becoming its servant. When craving arises, and you do not act on it, something important happens. At first, discomfort intensifies. The mind becomes restless. It tells you that something is wrong, that you are missing out, that you are denying yourself. This discomfort is not punishment. It is withdrawal. The mind has been conditioned to expect immediate gratification. When that expectation is not met, it protests. But if you stay present and do not escape, the craving eventually dissolves on its own. You see directly that it was never permanent. It only felt urgent because you believed it. This insight is transformative. You begin to realize that you do not need to satisfy every desire to survive. You do not need to eliminate every uncomfortable feeling. You can remain still while craving rises and falls. And each time you do, the mind becomes less reactive, less desperate, less controlled. This is how ownership is reclaimed. A mind ruled by craving cannot rest. Even pleasure becomes stressful because it is accompanied by fear of loss. Even success becomes unstable because it must be maintained. Even spiritual practice becomes another object of grasping. The Buddha warned that craving can attach to anything, even enlightenment. When practice becomes about acquiring an identity or achieving a state, craving has already infiltrated it. True freedom is quieter than that. It is the ability to experience pleasure without clinging, discomfort without panic, and desire without obedience. It is the ability to let things come and go without collapsing into reaction. As craving weakens, a new kind of satisfaction appears, not excitement, not stimulation, but contentment. A sense that nothing is missing in this moment. This contentment does not depend on conditions. It arises from understanding. The Buddha called this peace. A person who sees craving clearly is no longer owned by it. They still function in the world. They still act, choose, and engage. But their actions come from wisdom, not compulsion, from clarity, not hunger. This is why Buddhism says craving is the real master. And this is why liberation begins when you stop feeding it blindly. When craving no longer commands you, the mind finally belongs to you. 4. Discipline is kindness to the mind. Most people misunderstand discipline completely. They see it as punishment, restriction, or force. Something harsh that must be endured. Something that takes away pleasure and replaces it with struggle. Because of this misunderstanding, they resist discipline while unknowingly accepting chaos. Buddhism takes the opposite view. Discipline is not cruelty toward the mind. It is compassion for it. An undisciplined mind is not free. It is exhausted. It is constantly pulled in different directions, reacting to every impulse, every emotion, every distraction. It rarely rests. It rarely settles. Even when nothing is happening, it feels uneasy. This unease is not natural. It is the result of neglect. Imagine a child with no guidance, no boundaries, no rhythm. That child does not become happy. They become anxious, impulsive, and insecure. The same is true of the mind. When it has no structure, no training, no steady effort, it becomes restless and overwhelmed. The Buddha understood this deeply. That is why he taught right effort and right mindfulness. Not as rigid rules, but as forms of care. Discipline gives the mind something it desperately needs: stability. Without discipline, the mind chases stimulation. It jumps from thought to thought, pleasure to pleasure, distraction to distraction. It consumes constantly, but is never satisfied. This creates a cycle of agitation, followed by fatigue, followed by more craving. Over time, the mind loses trust in itself. Discipline interrupts this cycle. When you choose to sit, even when the mind wants to escape, you are teaching it patience. When you bring attention back to the breath, again and again, you are teaching it steadiness. When you refrain from acting on every impulse, you are teaching it restraint. None of this is violent. It is protective. At first, discipline feels uncomfortable because it removes the familiar escape routes. The mind protests. It tells you this is too strict, too boring, too hard. But this protest is not wisdom. It is habit resisting change. The Buddha warned against confusing discomfort with harm. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it challenges conditioning. But what harms the mind is not discipline. What harms it is endless indulgence without understanding. A mind that is indulged constantly becomes fragile. It cannot tolerate frustration. It cannot endure uncertainty. It collapses under pressure. Discipline strengthens the mind by gradually expanding its capacity to stay present without panic. This is why Buddhist discipline is gradual. It is not about forcing perfection. It is about consistent, gentle training. You notice when the mind wanders. You bring it back. You notice when unwholesome states arise. You do not feed them. You notice when wholesome states appear. You support them. This repetition builds confidence. The mind learns that it does not have to obey every urge. It learns that discomfort can be survived. It learns that clarity is possible. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. The mind begins to relax within structure. Just as a river flows more smoothly within its banks, the mind flows more peacefully within discipline. Boundaries create freedom, not confinement. The Buddha described this as taming the mind, not breaking it, not suppressing it. Taming it the way one would gently train a wild animal, with patience, consistency, and understanding. A disciplined mind feels safe. It knows what to do when confusion arises. It knows how to return to the present. It knows how to let go. This safety reduces anxiety at its root. Much of anxiety comes from the feeling that the mind is out of control. Discipline restores a sense of inner reliability. This is why discipline is kindness. It is kind to limit overstimulation. It is kind to establish regular practice. It is kind to say no to impulses that weaken you. It is kind to stay when the mind wants to flee. Each of these acts tells the mind you are not abandoned to chaos. Modern culture praises indulgence and calls it self-care. Buddhism is more honest. True care sometimes requires restraint, not because pleasure is wrong, but because unexamined pleasure leads to dependency. A disciplined mind can enjoy pleasure without clinging. An undisciplined mind clings and then suffers when pleasure ends. The Buddha did not teach discipline to make life dull. He taught it to make peace possible. Without discipline, meditation becomes inconsistent. Insight becomes shallow. Ethics become negotiable. The mind remains scattered even while pretending to practice. With discipline, the mind becomes unified. Attention stabilizes. Insight deepens. Life feels less frantic. Even challenges are met with greater calm. Importantly, Buddhist discipline is internal. It is not about rigid external rules imposed by fear or guilt. It is about understanding cause and effect. You refrain from certain actions not because you are forbidden, but because you see clearly what they lead to. This understanding transforms discipline from obligation into wisdom. You stop asking, "What am I allowed to do?" You start asking, "What leads to clarity and what leads to suffering?" From that question, discipline arises naturally. A person without discipline is constantly repairing damage, emotional damage, mental damage, relational damage. A disciplined person prevents much of that damage before it happens. This prevention is not dramatic, but it is powerful. The Buddha said, "A well-trained mind brings happiness, not excitement, not pleasure highs. Happiness, rooted in steadiness, clarity, and inner order." That happiness cannot exist in chaos. When you understand discipline as kindness, resistance softens. You stop seeing practice as a burden and start seeing it as refuge, a place the mind can return to when the world feels unstable. This is why discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is the foundation of it. A mind that is cared for through discipline no longer runs wild. It becomes an ally instead of a threat. And for the first time, peace stops feeling fragile. This is what the Buddha offered. Not control through force, but freedom through care. 5. Attachment creates poverty. Most people measure poverty by what is missing externally. Not enough money, not enough status, not enough security. Buddhism points to a deeper form of poverty, one that exists even in people who seem to have everything. This is the poverty created by attachment. Attachment is not the same as appreciation. Appreciation allows things to be enjoyed fully and released naturally. Attachment binds your sense of safety and identity to things that are unstable by nature. When you are attached, your well-being depends on conditions you do not control. The Buddha was very clear about this. Everything that arises is subject to change. Bodies age, relationships shift, emotions fluctuate, possessions break, reputation rises and falls. When the mind clings to what cannot remain fixed, fear becomes constant. Even happiness becomes fragile. This is why attachment creates poverty. It makes you feel like something is always at risk. A person attached to pleasure fears discomfort. A person attached to praise fears criticism. A person attached to identity fears change. A person attached to possessions fears loss. Even when these things are present, anxiety lingers in the background because the mind knows, whether consciously or not, that they can disappear. Attachment is the mind trying to freeze reality. Watch how attachment forms. Something pleasant appears. The mind labels it as good. Then it adds a second layer. I need this to continue. That second layer is attachment. It turns enjoyment into dependency. From that moment on, peace is conditional. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from pleasant experiences themselves, but from the clinging that follows. You are not distressed because something was enjoyable. You are distressed because you wanted it to last, repeat, or define you. This is why attachment impoverishes the mind. It narrows attention. It reduces life to a constant guarding of what you have and a constant chasing of what you lack. Energy that could be used for clarity is spent on protection and pursuit. Attachment also distorts perception. You stop seeing things as they are and start seeing them as threats or resources. People become sources of validation. Experiences become status. Even spiritual practice becomes a way to reinforce a self-image. The Buddha warned that attachment can cling to anything, including ideas, views, and beliefs. You can be attached to being right, attached to being seen as wise, attached to being spiritual. When these identities are threatened, suffering arises just as intensely as when material things are threatened. This reveals an uncomfortable truth. Attachment is not about the object, it is about insecurity. The mind attaches because it is afraid of emptiness, uncertainty, and impermanence. It wants guarantees in a world that offers none. So it grasps. And in grasping, it tightens. The Buddha did not teach that you must renounce everything externally to be free. He taught that you must see attachment clearly. A person can live simply and still be deeply attached. Another can live in abundance and remain free. The difference is internal. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It means intimacy without ownership. You care without clinging. You enjoy without demanding permanence. You love without trying to possess. This requires wisdom, not force. When attachment loosens, something surprising happens. Instead of feeling deprived, you feel lighter. The constant background tension eases. You no longer have to manage life so tightly. You respond instead of defend. The Buddha described this as release. Release is not losing something. It is losing the belief that you need it to be whole. A non-attached mind is rich because it does not depend on conditions for peace. It can adapt. It can endure loss without collapse. It can enjoy gain without arrogance. It remains balanced. This balance is not emotional flatness. It is emotional resilience. An attached mind, by contrast, is easily shaken. Small changes feel catastrophic. Delays feel unbearable. Loss feels like annihilation. This is not because the losses are objectively devastating, but because the mind had invested its identity in what was lost. This is the poverty the Buddha pointed to. Not lack of things, but lack of inner freedom. When you observe attachment directly, you begin to notice its cost. How much energy it consumes. How much fear it generates. How much it limits your capacity to be present. Seeing this clearly weakens its grip. You start to ask different questions. Instead of how do I keep this, you ask, can I let this change? Instead of what if I lose this, you ask what remains if I do. These questions do not lead to despair. They lead to strength. Impermanence stops being a threat and becomes a teacher. It shows you what can be enjoyed and released, what can be held lightly, what cannot be relied upon for lasting peace. The Buddha taught that true wealth is contentment, not the contentment of resignation, but the contentment that comes from understanding. When you understand that clinging creates suffering, letting go becomes intelligent rather than painful. This does not happen overnight. Attachment loosens gradually as insight deepens. Each time you notice clinging and choose not to feed it, the mind becomes less desperate, less afraid, less poor. Eventually, something shifts. You realize that peace was never in the objects of attachment. It was in the space that appears when clinging stops. That space is not empty. It is stable. It is free. A mind that is not attached owns itself, and that ownership cannot be taken away. 6. A wandering mind is a tired mind. Most people believe they are mentally exhausted because life demands too much from them. Buddhism points to a deeper cause. The mind is not tired because it works too hard. It is tired because it is never still. A wandering mind is constantly pulled outward. One moment it is replaying the past, the next it is rehearsing the future. Then it is judging the present. This movement never stops. Even during rest, the mind continues traveling, planning, worrying, comparing, fantasizing. This is not productivity. This is depletion. The Buddha described this state as restlessness and distraction. A mind scattered across time and thought cannot gather its energy. Attention leaks constantly. And what leaks attention leaks life force. Watch your own experience. After long periods of mental wandering, you feel drained. even if your body has done very little. But after periods of deep presence, even in silence, you feel refreshed. The difference is not effort, it is focus. The wandering mind consumes energy without direction. It jumps from one object to another, never settling long enough to understand anything fully. This creates surface-level engagement with life. Information increases. Wisdom does not. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is the remedy, not as a technique to relax, but as a training in collecting the mind. When attention is gathered in the present moment, the mind stops leaking energy into unnecessary movement. At first, this feels difficult. The mind resists stillness because it is addicted to motion. It has been conditioned to equate busyness with safety. When movement stops, unease arises, boredom appears, anxiety surfaces. This does not mean stillness is harmful. It means the mind is unaccustomed to rest. The Buddha advised patience here. You do not force the mind into silence. You gently return attention again and again to the breath, to bodily sensation, to simple awareness of what is happening now. Each return is an act of training. Over time, something shifts. The mind begins to settle naturally. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer pull attention as strongly. Awareness becomes steadier. The constant internal commentary quiets. This quiet is not dullness. It is clarity. A collected mind sees more with less effort. It notices subtle changes. It understands cause and effect. It responds instead of reacts. Because energy is no longer scattered, it becomes available for insight. This is why the Buddha emphasized concentration as a foundation for wisdom. Without a stable mind, insight remains intellectual. With stability, insight becomes lived understanding. A wandering mind also amplifies suffering. When pain arises, a scattered mind multiplies it by thinking about it endlessly. Why is this happening? How long will this last? What does this mean about me? Each question adds another layer of distress. A steady mind experiences pain without unnecessary commentary. Sensation is known as sensation. Feeling is known as feeling. Suffering does not spiral. This is not emotional suppression. It is accurate perception. The tiredness of the wandering mind also shows up as dissatisfaction. Even pleasurable experiences fail to satisfy because the mind is already moving on. While eating, it thinks of the next task. While resting, it thinks of unfinished work. While succeeding, it worries about maintaining success. Presence is constantly postponed. The Buddha taught that happiness cannot be found in a mind that is never here. Contentment arises when attention rests fully in the present moment without grasping or resistance. This resting is not laziness. It is alignment. As mindfulness deepens, the mind begins to trust stillness. It learns that nothing terrible happens when it stops roaming. This trust allows deeper rest, not the rest of sleep, but the rest of non-striving. This rest restores energy at its source. You begin to notice that clarity itself is energizing. Decisions require less effort. Emotions pass more quickly. The sense of being overwhelmed decreases, not because life has changed, but because the mind is no longer everywhere at once. The Buddha compared an untrained mind to a fish flopping on dry land, constantly agitated, constantly struggling. A trained mind is like a fish returned to water. Movement becomes natural rather than frantic. This training does not require withdrawal from life. It requires returning to life as it is happening, fully, without mental escape. When the mind stops wandering, it stops leaking strength. What returns is vitality, not excitement, but quiet energy, the kind that supports patience, understanding, and compassion. This is why the Buddha said, a collected mind leads to happiness. not because it avoids difficulty, but because it meets difficulty without exhaustion. A wandering mind is tired because it never comes home. Mindfulness brings it back, and when the mind learns how to stay, it finally begins to rest. 7. Freedom is an inside job. Most people spend their lives trying to arrange the outside world so they can finally feel free on the inside. They change jobs, chase money, seek relationships, move cities, adopt new identities, or wait for the right circumstances. Buddhism cuts through this illusion with precision. No external condition can liberate a mind that has not been trained. The Buddha was explicit about this. Freedom does not come from controlling life. It comes from understanding the mind that experiences life. As long as your inner world is ruled by craving, aversion, and confusion, no amount of external improvement will bring lasting peace. The same patterns will simply reappear in a new setting. This is why people often feel hopeful at the beginning of a change and disappointed later. The environment changes, but the mind comes with them. True freedom, in the Buddhist sense, is not the ability to do whatever you want. That is impulse. True freedom is the ability to not do what weakens you. It is the capacity to pause, to see clearly, and to choose wisely, even when the mind is pressured. This freedom begins internally. The Buddha taught that liberation arises through direct understanding of experience. You observe how suffering arises. You see how craving tightens the mind. You recognize how aversion creates resistance. You notice how ignorance blinds perception. This observation is not theoretical. It is lived, moment-by-moment awareness. As this understanding deepens, the mind naturally releases what causes suffering, not because it is forced to, but because it sees the cost clearly. Letting go becomes intelligent, not heroic. This is why the path is internal. No one can do it for you. No teacher, text, or ritual can replace direct seeing. Others can point, but you must walk. The inside job begins with responsibility. Not blame, but ownership. You stop blaming circumstances for your suffering. You stop waiting for people to change. You stop postponing peace until conditions improve. This is not resignation. It is empowerment. When you realize that freedom depends on how you relate to experience, your attention shifts. You stop obsessing over outcomes and start refining perception. You become more interested in understanding the mind than in controlling the world. This shift changes everything. Challenges still arise. Pain still occurs, loss still happens, but the relationship to these experiences changes. They no longer define you, they no longer imprison you, they become part of the path rather than obstacles to it. The Buddha emphasized that freedom is gradual. It unfolds as layers of confusion fall away. First, you gain freedom from gross reactions, then from subtle clinging, eventually from the sense of a solid self that needs defending at all. This process requires patience. The mind has been conditioned for years, sometimes decades. Expecting instant liberation is another form of craving. The practice is to return again and again to awareness, understanding, and restraint. Each moment of clarity weakens the old patterns. Each moment of non-reaction builds inner strength. Each moment of letting go increases freedom. Importantly, inner freedom does not make you detached from life. It makes you more fully present. You engage without being consumed. You care without being trapped. You act without being driven. This is why the Buddha described liberation as peace, not excitement, not pleasure. Peace that is unshakable because it does not depend on conditions. A free mind is flexible. It adapts without collapsing. It enjoys without clinging. It faces difficulty without panic. This flexibility is not passivity. It is resilience. The outside world will always be uncertain. Bodies will age. Relationships will change. Circumstances will shift. Waiting for permanence in what is impermanent is a losing strategy. Buddhism offers a different approach. Develop a mind that can meet impermanence without suffering. This is the inside job. When the mind is no longer running you, something fundamental changes. You stop being pushed by urges and pulled by fears. You begin to live intentionally. Choices align with values. Actions reflect understanding. This does not make life easy. It makes it honest. The Buddha never promised comfort. He promised clarity. And clarity is more powerful than comfort because it allows you to stand firmly even when life is unstable. When freedom is internal, nothing external can take it away. This is the end of the path, and also the beginning. A mind that is free becomes a refuge, not just for itself, but for others as well. And that is the deepest form of ownership there is. 8. Suffering ends when resistance ends. Most people believe suffering comes from pain. Buddhism makes a sharper distinction. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. The difference lies in resistance. Pain is what happens. Resistance is what the mind adds. When something unpleasant arises, the untrained mind immediately tightens. It says, "This should not be happening." It argues with reality. It demands change. It searches for escape. That inner struggle is where suffering multiplies. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from experience itself, but from the refusal to allow experience to be as it is. Observe this carefully. When discomfort appears, there is the raw sensation, pressure, heat, sadness, fear. Then comes the second arrow, mental resistance. Why me? I hate this. I can't handle this. How do I get rid of it? That second arrow is optional, but most people fire it automatically. Resistance is exhausting. It consumes enormous energy and produces no relief. In fact, it strengthens suffering by keeping the mind locked in opposition to reality. This does not mean passivity or liking what is painful. Acceptance in Buddhism is not approval. It is clarity. It is seeing what is present without fighting it. When the Buddha spoke of acceptance, he meant allowing experience to arise and pass without adding hostility or clinging. This allowance changes the entire quality of experience. Pain felt with resistance becomes overwhelming. Pain felt with awareness becomes manageable. The mind resists because it believes resistance will protect it. It thinks that if it fights hard enough, it can control outcomes. But reality does not respond to protest. It responds to understanding. When resistance drops, something unexpected happens. Space appears around the experience. Sensation is still there, but it is no longer suffocating. Emotion is present, but it is no longer consuming. The mind stops bracing and starts breathing. This is not weakness. This is intelligence. The Buddha trained his students to sit with discomfort without fleeing, not to glorify pain, but to see clearly that discomfort is impermanent. When you stop fighting it, it changes. When you cling or resist, it persists. Resistance freezes experience. Allowing lets it move. This lesson is deeply uncomfortable for the ego. The ego wants control. It wants certainty. It wants guarantees. Acceptance threatens its strategy. But Buddhism is not interested in protecting the ego. It is interested in ending suffering. When resistance ends, insight begins. You start to see that many things you feared were intolerable are, in fact, survivable. You discover that emotions rise, peak and fall on their own when not interfered with. You learn that discomfort does not define you and does not last. This realization builds deep confidence. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in awareness. The Buddha called this equanimity, a balanced mind that can meet pleasure without clinging and pain without resistance. This balance is not numbness. It is steadiness. Equanimity allows you to stay present in difficult moments instead of dissociating or reacting. It allows wisdom to function when emotion is strong. It allows compassion to arise without overwhelm. A mind trained in non-resistance does not collapse under hardship. It bends without breaking. It adapts instead of panicking. This is where true strength develops. Most people exhaust themselves fighting what already exists. Buddhism teaches you to conserve energy by aligning with reality instead of opposing it. That energy is then available for insight, ethical action, and compassion. Resistance also keeps suffering personal. It frames pain as an attack on the self. Acceptance removes that personalization. Pain becomes an experience, not a verdict. This shift is profound. Life will still bring difficulty. Loss will still occur. Uncertainty will remain. But the mind no longer treats these as enemies. They become part of the unfolding. The Buddha did not promise a life without pain. He offered a way to end unnecessary suffering. When resistance ends, clarity replaces struggle. Peace replaces tension. The mind stops arguing with what is and starts responding wisely to what is possible. This is not the end of feeling. It is the end of war. And when the inner war ends, the mind finally rests. 9. Clarity comes before change. Most people try to change their lives by forcing behavior. They push themselves with motivation, pressure, guilt, or fear. Sometimes this works briefly. Most of the time it collapses. Buddhism explains why. Change that does not arise from clarity is unstable. The Buddha taught that wisdom comes before transformation. Until you see clearly how suffering arises, effort becomes misdirected. You may change habits, but the underlying confusion remains. Old patterns resurface in new forms. This is why people repeat cycles they swear they have outgrown. Clarity means seeing things as they are, not as you wish them to be. It means understanding cause and effect at the level of direct experience. When you see clearly what leads to suffering and what leads to peace, change stops feeling like sacrifice. It becomes the natural response. For example, when you truly see how anger harms you, not intellectually but viscerally, restraint arises on its own. You do not need to force yourself to be patient. Patience becomes intelligent. The Buddha emphasized insight because insight removes the need for constant self-control. Control is tiring. Understanding is effortless. A confused mind relies on willpower. A clear mind relies on wisdom. This does not mean effort is unnecessary. It means effort must be guided by understanding. Without clarity, effort turns into struggle. With clarity, effort turns into alignment. The Buddha described this as right view. Not a belief system, but a way of seeing. Right view recognizes impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-ownership. These insights reshape motivation at its root. When you see impermanence clearly, you stop clinging to fleeting states. When you see unsatisfactoriness clearly, you stop chasing what cannot fulfill you. When you see non-ownership clearly, you stop trying to control what is not yours to control. These shifts change behavior organically. Most people attempt to change outcomes while ignoring perception. They want different results without different understanding. Buddhism reverses this approach. It changes perception first. Results follow. This is why mindfulness is so central. Mindfulness reveals patterns. It shows you what triggers reactions. It exposes the subtle moments where suffering begins. Without this visibility, change remains superficial. Clarity also brings honesty. You stop lying to yourself about what works and what doesn't. You stop romanticizing habits that harm you. You stop justifying actions that increase suffering. This honesty can be uncomfortable. It removes excuses, but it is also liberating. You no longer waste energy pretending. The Buddha did not shame people into change. He invited them to look closely. When people looked closely enough, change happened naturally. This process takes time. Insight deepens gradually. Each moment of clarity weakens ignorance. Each insight loosens a knot. Over time, the mind reorganizes itself around understanding rather than habit. Importantly, clarity does not guarantee immediate comfort. Seeing clearly can initially increase discomfort because denial dissolves. But this discomfort is temporary. Confusion causes chronic suffering. Clarity causes temporary unease followed by lasting peace. The mind that prioritizes clarity becomes resilient. It does not depend on constant motivation. It does not collapse when discipline falters. It recalibrates because it understands. This is why Buddhism does not promise quick fixes. It offers durable transformation. When clarity comes first, change is no longer violent. You are not at war with yourself. You are cooperating with reality. Actions flow from insight rather than resistance. The Buddha said that seeing things as they truly are leads to dispassion. Dispassion leads to release. Release leads to peace. This sequence cannot be reversed. Trying to force release without clarity leads to suppression. Trying to force peace without understanding leads to avoidance. Only clarity creates stable change. When you commit to seeing clearly, even when it is uncomfortable, you stop wandering blindly. You stop repeating the same mistakes with different labels. The mind begins to trust itself again. And from that trust, real change finally takes root. Ownership begins with responsibility. Most people want freedom without responsibility. They want peace without effort, clarity without discipline, and change without accountability. Buddhism is uncompromising here. Freedom begins the moment you take full responsibility for your inner life. Responsibility in Buddhism does not mean blame. It means understanding cause and effect and accepting your role within it. The Buddha taught that you inherit the results of your actions, not as punishment, but as natural consequence. When this is seen clearly, responsibility stops feeling heavy. It becomes grounding. A mind that avoids responsibility is always searching for explanations outside itself. People, circumstances, fate, or luck become the reason for suffering. This keeps the mind passive. It waits. It reacts. It resents. A responsible mind does something different. It asks one question repeatedly. What am I doing that contributes to this experience? This question is not self-attack. It is inquiry. When you take responsibility for your thoughts, you stop believing every story the mind tells. When you take responsibility for your reactions, you stop excusing harmful behavior. When you take responsibility for your attention, you stop wasting it on what weakens you. This is where ownership begins. The Buddha emphasized intention as the core of action. What you intend shapes what you do. What you do shapes what you become. Responsibility means becoming aware of intention before action unfolds. This awareness gives you leverage. Without responsibility, life feels random. With responsibility, patterns become visible. You see how small choices accumulate. You see how repeated reactions shape character. You see how avoidance prolongs suffering. This seeing is empowering. Many people fear responsibility because they associate it with guilt. Buddhism separates the two. Guilt looks backward and punishes. Responsibility looks forward and adjusts. One traps you, the other frees you. A responsible mind does not collapse when it sees its mistakes. It learns. It corrects. It continues. This attitude is essential on the path. Without it, practice becomes performative. You meditate, read, and speak about wisdom, but you do not apply it when it matters. Responsibility brings practice into daily life. The Buddha did not ask his students to control the world. He asked them to train the mind. That training requires ownership. You cannot outsource awareness. You cannot delegate discipline. You cannot blame your way into freedom. When responsibility is embraced, excuses fall away. You stop waiting for motivation and start acting from understanding. You stop dramatizing difficulty and start working with it. This does not make life rigid, it makes it honest. A responsible mind recognizes limits. It knows when to rest and when to persist. It knows when to let go and when to endure. It is not driven by pride or avoidance, but by clarity. Ownership also brings humility. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a participant in experience. This humility opens the door to compassion, both for yourself and others. The Buddha taught that liberation is self-realized. No one can walk the path for you. Teachers can guide, communities can support, but responsibility cannot be transferred. This is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to empower you. When you take responsibility for your inner life, you stop being surprised by your own reactions. You stop being controlled by unconscious habits. You become predictable in the best sense, steady, ethical, grounded. This steadiness is what the Buddha called refuge, a place within yourself that does not depend on circumstances. Ownership of the mind does not mean rigid control. It means consistent care, attention, restraint, understanding. These qualities create inner order. And from inner order, freedom emerges naturally. When you take responsibility, you stop asking who is to blame and start asking what leads to peace. That question changes everything. This is the final lesson, and it returns you to the beginning. If you can control your mind, you own something no one can take away. The Buddha did not teach comfort. He taught freedom. And freedom was never about escaping life, gaining status, or controlling the world. It was always about ending inner slavery. If your mind is uncontrolled, nothing you possess is truly yours. Not your time, not your energy, not your choices. You are carried by impulses, pulled by fears, and driven by habits you did not examine. That is not living. That is being lived. But the moment you begin to see clearly, everything changes. When thoughts are observed instead of believed, craving loses its grip. When discipline is understood as care, the mind stabilizes. When attachment loosens, poverty ends. When attention returns to the present, energy is restored. When resistance drops, suffering fades. When clarity leads, change becomes natural. When responsibility is accepted, ownership begins. This path is not dramatic. It is quiet. It does not announce itself. It unfolds through daily awareness, small restraint, and honest observation. There are no shortcuts because there is nothing to escape, only something to understand. The Buddha's message was simple and uncompromising. Train the mind and it becomes your ally. Neglect it, and it becomes your master. Freedom is not given, it is cultivated. And when the mind is no longer running you, you finally own your life.